Okay, guys, now participants, you can raise your hand and to ask the questions. There are a couple of questions on the Q&A. Okay, I can see a lot of, just one second, I'll just, first is Rajesh. Yeah, please tell actually the question to whom actually, okay?
Actually, this is Rajesh. Can you hear me?
Yeah, Rajesh.
I have a question for Gaurav. Gaurav, my name is Rajesh Munjal. I just wanted to inquire, do you have some ready-made product which has been built up, or it is basically for the customized thing based on the requirement which is being built?
So we have some products that we have already built. So for example, we offer very customized ETAs and distance time estimation APIs. For example, for companies in India right now who for example, run motorbikes. So Google does not provide a motorbike API mode. Similarly, we are powering one company, that operates trucks intra-city. So we have some products, some others. We are working closely with our partners to build something out, which hopefully we'll scale to other customers. But yeah, we have one or two products. Others are in the pipeline.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
So,
Rajesh, just hold on. Actually, there are a lot of other questions.
Yeah, so I just wanted to say that I would like to connect to him separately. I send him a LinkedIn request.
Yeah, absolutely. Just feel free to contact me on LinkedIn.
Thanks. Next is Ashwin Pratap. Ashwin Pratap, you can. Ashwin, I think. Okay.
If you can read his question, if he has typed it.
Divik. Divik, can you ask your question?
Hi, Anshuman. Anshuman, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Anshuman, I mean, I think the point that you made with the picture that you showed, which is India versus Europe, and solutions need to be made country specific. I mean, that's extremely a very valid point. And I come in with close to about 10 years experience in the e-mobility space with about 16 patents. Where I was coming to with my question is, one point that you mentioned is raw materials for motors are coming in from China, which is right. Lithium, amongst most of the Argentinian, Bolivian, Chile companies, countries, the mining companies are owned, or rather are heavily invested by Chinese. So my question was, do you see that, China would be the next Middle East? And a follow-up to the same thing is, do you think Indian companies or Indian startups or even Indian companies have already missed the bus?
It's a political question. I think what is going to happen, and this is a power play everybody is trying to play, and that is why everybody else is trying to create a safety net. For example, Mercedes-Benz is not doing PSM electric motors. We are doing ASM electric motors because that means we don't need materials like neodymium or dysprosium. So that is rare earth materials. So again, the research in the battery area is also moving. Is lithium ion is the answer? We don't know that because a lot of research is happening. There are solid state batteries, lithium metal anodes, and some other cobalt lead or potassium lead. So what I'm saying is that we don't know yet what is going to happen, right? But you are right. This is a more of a geopolitical power struggle that is going to happen or happening.
Thanks, Sanjay.
Hey, next is Harshit. Harshit. Okay, Tyagarajan. Yeah, go ahead, Harshit.
Hello.
Yeah, Harshit, go ahead.
Yeah, I have a question for Anshuman.
Yes,
regarding how you have shown the way EV is going to take place ahead, like the EV revolution and all. So how India is actually prepared for this particular phase like EV? seeing Bangalore itself as a metropolitan city, so how are you seeing if Bangalore has itself developed a EV kind of a solution in coming next 5 years down the line?
I, I don't know how India is prepared, but if India has to prepare for EV revolution, then India has to really understand the context, the practices, and India has to work around many things. And work is happening. For example, right now there is a smart grid initiative. There is a government, Niti Aayog has invited companies for setting up charging infrastructures, and big companies and OEMs are participating in that. So it's too early to say, but as I said, for the success, there are many other elements. Just because one OEMs make a very good car, which is electric car, will not make it a success in terms of mobility solution. I mean, and that is why the history picture I've shown from Mercedes, that since 1906 we have been making electric cars here and there, but the success is beyond technology. Success is about how business model, how OEMs accept the change, and how mobility practices are understood and solutions are catered around that.
And I would also like to know how you had mentioned user behavior. So, for any startup or any organization going into this kind of disruption, how would they try to judge the user behavior at such an early stage?
Well, I think, but that's always a challenge for any business, that how do you predict the future? And I believe if you study business administration or economics, then there are certain models, and Parag would be probably more, he would be an expert in those models. How do you bring those models? But I mean, small things we have to understand. For example, when you talk about full tank in the context of petrol and diesel, will you also talk about full charge in the context of EV? Maybe not. Maybe the vocabulary will change. Maybe the things will change. And I think one of the use case I saw is that if that can be predicted, that when is your car ready, electric car is ready, to whether can you meet this journey, can you make this journey? I think it was Deepesh was talking about from Marathalli to your destination. I think those things will kick in. But and this is where the experts have to pitch in. Society by and large is not going to tell you what they need. You have to observe, and then as a tech expert, as an innovative entrepreneur, you have to figure the solution out. Solution is your responsibility. Practices is society they are practicing. They will not tell you what they are doing. You have to really go out and understand.
Okay. Thanks, Anshuman.
Yeah, next is Amit Agarwal.
Thanks. Anshuman, this is Amit. I'm dialing in from Munich, actually. So good afternoon to you guys. And thanks for the wonderful talk. One of the key drivers in my understanding for EV adoption is falling battery costs, and the jury's out there in terms of where those costs lie today, as well as what they could be in the future. Just to give you some numbers that we keep hearing, there's of course the BNEF number of $156 per kilowatt hour battery pack last year, going about to $130. And then there's another view, which is evolving from institutions like MIT, which I think in November last year projected that we would perhaps achieve $130 per kilowatt hour price only in 2030. And then there are comments from Volkswagen, Tesla, and I'm sure Daimler, Mercedes as well. Where do you see the reality today, and at what price point in terms of pack level prices do you see a cost parity for consumers between EV and ICE cars? Thank you.
I think if you talk about electric car range, it is today from 100 kilometer from an Indian car from Tata to 500 kilometer from high-end cars from international manufacturers, right? And if you talk about IC engine cars, then the range is roughly a small, let's say, a small car, compact mini car is 600 kilometer to a big luxury car will offer you 1,000 kilometer range just because the tank size is big. Now, battery cost, I think the realistic or acceptable figure probably is, since you are coming from Germany and I'm quoting 100 euros per kilowatt hour. Anything above probably is expensive. And even today.
That's at cell or pack? Sorry.
Battery pack. I'm talking about kilowatt hour.
Battery pack. At pack level. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, pack level. Yeah, and I think even today, the battery is the most or the major contribution to the cost in a car today, even EV. So if you bring it to half, suddenly you will see electric vehicles are way, way cheaper compared to comparable diesel or petrol. So I think but again, as I said, the pricing will depend on the demand and supply. Again, there is a model. I'm not an expert in that. People are probably applying that, and as again, the politics, control of the raw material. But yes, a big driver for EV would be battery cost.
Thank you.
Yeah, next is Tyagarajan.
Hi, thanks, Keshav. My question is to Anushman and partly to Gaurav also. With the changing technologies to battery-related cost and charging infrastructure not available properly, will the OEMs join together and have a standardized battery? Is there a body which is controlling the OEMs to manufacture standardized battery? Because the adoption to...
Gaurav, you want to answer?
I think this is more up your alley.
Giving insight about connecting the battery charged stations.
So there are standards for charging coming up, SHADEMO, GBT, and as well as European standards. If you ask me, American standards, is there any uniformity across these charging connectors to the battery? No, today no. India has not even defined its standard. They are waiting. But it's again a political game because the standards, whatever connectors you see, they are all patented. And any standards is accepted, the company who invented will get a lot of royalty. So that is why there is a discussion going on here on charging. So right now there is no agreement on, uniform agreement on starting from Japan to America on charging connectivity. And battery pack, I don't see any agreement because it's going to be a technology like engines. So I don't see any agreement over there because this will be the brand. How battery cell could be the common. Cell suppliers are very limited, but the battery will be a brand specific.
Connecting to the same analogy, I asked Gaurav if same manufacturers can connect to each other and share the data about the battery swapping. Will it be a change in the market scenario?
This is not sort of electric vehicles and batteries is not my area of expertise. But from what I do understand is there is, because this is such a common pain point in the industry, there are people trying to collaborate on this. But I think the current focus is a little more, especially in terms of battery tech, from whatever I understand, is it's a little more at a fundamental science level, which is trying to understand, hey, how do we improve efficiency? What kind of materials make sense, etc. So probably a little too early to just think digital necessarily in terms of batteries. But I think we'll sort of get there in time as well.
Next is Sangamesh.
Thanks, Keshav. This is Sangamesh. My question is to Anshuman. I'm calling you from, I'm connected from Saudi Arabia. So here we travel speed of 15 minutes, travel time of 15 minutes covers easily 25-30 kilometers. My talk is about congestion in India. We have spoken a lot about battery future and all, but I think we missed out on the part of congestion. Are we trying to solve something there? Because you had shown a sheet on Europe where 3 million are personal vehicle and 16 million are personal vehicle in Europe. But if we increase personal vehicles in India, we again get into a situation of congestion where we are not solving the green problem of emission and XYZ. And we also, when we shift to EVs, we reduce the range by a consumer simply switching on AC and sitting in a traffic jam.
No, you are completely there with your observations. And I told in my talk that you have to work on this. And this is where the work of Deepesh and Gaurav is very, very important, that how will they use the technology to solve this? And maybe they should answer about this, that is the technology alone going to solve this particular problem? Or if government also has to pitch in to, proactively think about urban planning and mobility practices. So Gaurav, and over to Gaurav, Deepesh and Gaurav on this.
Are we progressing in this direction anywhere from the government side?
I would ask Deepesh and Gaurav to answer because they are working in this area. Probably they can answer this question better.
Sure. Thanks, so maybe I can take a crack at it, and Deepesh, feel free to add. So there is definitely a lot of efforts by mobility companies and ride-hailing companies, and just like mobility as a service companies, trying to move in this area. I think Indian government is still from what I understand, it's still in a little more nascent stages. But again, similar developing countries across the globe that also have congestion problems are trying to solve these through a combination of public-private partnerships. I can give you an example. So Didi, which is the leading ride-hailing company in China, today powers more than 30 cities, where it powers the traffic management systems. So a big advantage that some of these companies have is their ability to work with data, run simulations, understand traffic, etc. So what Didi, as an example, does is it, based on this data, it runs traffic lights to say, hey, you know what, these traffic lights should have these waiting times. Some of it is actually one or two cities they control dynamically via APIs. And what they have been able to do through sort of this combination is, an example I know they shared with us was in one area, in one very heavily congested part of the city, where average travel times through the day was 16 kilometers per hour. Through this partnership with them, they were able to increase this from 16 kilometers per hour to 28 kilometers per hour, just through better traffic light management and sort of congestion management, etc. Similarly, Didi, I think it's the most advanced company in the world at this. They also do dynamic lane management, which is imagine in some city where there is one road that it's a huge bottleneck. Now, ideally, if you had lanes in typical traffic patterns in many cities across the globe is people live in one part of the city, commute to a different part of the city for work. So there is probably traffic going one way in the morning, that's more dense, and coming back, it's sort of the other way. But most sort of lane configurations are like, let's say 3+3. Now, ideally, it should be 5+1 in the morning and 1+5 in the evening. So again, these are examples of things that some of these companies are doing together to improve congestion and better traffic planning. Obviously, companies like Ola, Uber, Move and Sing, through encouraging better sharing and pooling, also to some extent help improve some of this. So yeah, I think these models are definitely gaining traction. And I think going forward, I anticipate to see a lot more of these public-private partnerships to improve congestion. I think many governments across the globe are already aware of this, and there are various different models being experimented. As an example, in Europe, some cities now have their own mobility as a service apps, which combine multimodal transportation. As again, Dipesh mentioned, it's a trend where for first mile and last mile, so cities themselves mandate that every mobility transportation provider has to integrate with their app, and they provide sort of this aggregated view of transportation, again, thereby trying to improve congestion. So I think it's a problem that's recognized across the globe now. And I anticipate even in India in the next 5 years, there's going to be a lot more effort put in this direction.
Yeah. Dipesh, do you want to pitch in?
Just a small thought here, that while I think government might take some time, I think what people are realizing, and especially large corporates, is they are quite flexible with changing the working hours of their employees. So instead of calling the employees at 9 a.m., I think obviously because of our data and other data, kind of they are able to plan that let's get 50% of the load at 9, but the remaining 50% let's get them at 8 o'clock, right? So that the commute time and hence I think the experience of the people coming to the office reduces. So I think that's the effort which corporates and larger companies are doing on their own. I think from the government point of view, I think the best I would say which is happening is at least they are open to evaluating these new models, for which a lot of them don't even have regulatory things. So I think the different governments across the country are taking a fairly open point of view, saying that yes, while this is not in the law right now, but we are open to understanding what you are trying to do and how will it sell. So pooling etc. is kind of a little bit not really covered in the law, and I think the government is open to understanding it.
Okay, Harshit, do you have any other question before we go on to the?
Yeah, I have a question to Gaurav.
Go ahead.
Hello. Yeah, Gaurav, I just wanted to know how Next Billion is trying to also collaborate. See, you had mentioned how private organizations' mobility about how AI and ML is working upon with the private organizations today. But how are you seeing the same kind of partnership with the public transport, other
So
than the
yeah,
metro multimodal model which has been told by Dipesh? Other than those, like you have so many other public transport which is still running India. Like, I think more than 50%, 50 to 60% runs on that. So
correct.
how
Yes.
would you?
Yes, I think we definitely see, as you rightly said, I think public transportation overall is probably a much bigger piece of the overall mobility pie
Yes.
than some of, let's say, Ola, Ubers, etc. Although that's where some of the more digital adoption is happening. So I think from our side, specifically speaking as a startup, we are relatively early. So our approach so far has just been biased with the fact that, hey, it's easier to work with private players. So we are a relatively newish company. But yeah, I think the overall ambition for us is to eventually be solving this not just for cars, bikes, but multimodal public transportation, subways, I don't know, flying taxis in the future, everything. So we definitely want to help solve all of these problems. We think maps and location are very central to improving the quality of our public transportation services. We are already working with one company that's a bus aggregator, although it's a private player. But yeah, I think that's the goal over time for us to try and work with all of them. If there's a specific thought or idea or an opportunity that you have in mind, would absolutely love to explore if there's a way for us to help.
Okay, so how could I reach you out for this thing?
Just reach me on LinkedIn, or I will
Okay.
just add my email here on chat.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. Thanks, Gaurav.
Yeah, next is Amitabh Srivatsa.
Yeah, hi guys. So this is a question for anyone on the panel. I always believe the solutions of today could be problems of tomorrow. So in relation to the batteries of the EVs, what is the view of the panel in terms of, will we see battery casings lying around the road, say 20, 30 years from now, the way we see plastics?
My answer would be no, because Mercedes-Benz, for example, is investing with the startups getting into joint ventures into battery recycling.
No,
and as a society.
Sorry. So there's plastics which are also recycled. The problem is plastics are not collected to be recycled. That's the problem. So how will we collect the casings?
You have to incentivize it. For example, if you go to any country in the West, for example, go to Europe, you don't see plastic bottles on the street, because the moment you return plastic bottles, you get 25 cents or 10 cents, whatever it is. And if you consume 100 plastic bottles in a week, then it's a lot of money. So I think this is how it works. If you don't incentivize it, if you don't get money back for your old battery pack, you probably will not just throw it there. So I think there has to be some incentivization.
Agree. Thanks.
Yeah. Anybody else? Shivaram Chandran. Okay, Divik. I think Divik, you can go ahead.
Is Parag still on the call? I'm sorry.
Yeah, Parag is still on the call, actually. Yes.
Go ahead.
Hey, Parag. Probably a standard question that you must be getting asked by people is, so as we go in the post-COVID phase, where do you think are the horizontals and the verticals that investors should watch out for and see opportunities? And sorry, for the founders to think about starting up a business, in your opinion.
So I think I can give you some names like e-commerce, online education, online entertainment, etc., etc. But I think as an entrepreneur, the best thing to do is to have a hypothesis, then go up to something like Google Trends, figure out whether your hypothesis seems to be correct, or not, then use tools like even Google AdWords is, I guess, the keyword tracker tool, etc., etc. So have a hypothesis, go in and test that hypothesis based on the data that is available today. Thankfully, lots of it is available. So that would be my thought, rather than giving you a set of industries. This is just too uncertain at this point to really predict what is going to happen. But the initial indications do show up on Google Trends, isn't it? So,
thanks, Parag.
Anyway, this is the first time actually the investor is getting a very less number of questions, and entrepreneurs and subject matter experts are getting.
Yeah.
That's a good place to be, Keshav.
Yeah, first time I've seen the investor is not bombarded with question and everybody else is.
Okay, guys, any more questions? I think there are a couple of questions.
I just had one. Anshuman, this was one to you and to Parag. And this is a follow-up to the fact that the cost of batteries which are falling. Now, as the batteries are falling, one school of thought that's not really come out is, as the batteries fall, the capacity of battery in an electric vehicle is also going to increase. Right? Now, if that is a thesis to be looked at, because an increase in battery capacity has a lot of additional effects to the consumer or to the fleet owner. Now, Anshuman, where I wanted you to let me know in is, is this thesis going to hold steep? If yes, probably even to you, Parag, is, since you've seen a lot of startups and things like that, do you really see an uptake of battery swapping? I mean, if a battery can give you 150 kilometers, he comes back home and charges even on a two-wheeler or a four-wheeler. Would you see a swapping of a battery pack, or swapping as an industry flourishing itself?
Okay, so Dilip, good question. Now, today, I think battery packs capacity, and I'm talking about, let's say, cars from Mercedes-Benz is 80 kilowatt power. And with that capacity, and with a big car like it's a SUV EQC, you can go up to 400 kilometers under variable conditions, right?
Right.
Now the question is how big capacity you want to be. I mean, you want to have. You have to put a limit somewhere. You have to put a stop somewhere, because ultimately it's a cost. No matter how cheap the battery is, ultimately customer has to pay the price for it, right? Now, with capacity, the question will also come, okay, what is the torque you are delivering? For example, the current EQC delivers 760 Newton meter torque, and which is an amazing torque, amazing torque. Now the question is, will every EV in the market will deliver the same torque? No, maybe not. Coming to the range question, I think it's all about the vehicle design, the choice, who is buying and for it is for, and the range that you want to have from it will decide the battery capacity, and not only the battery cost alone. And yeah, so I hope this answers your question about the cost.
You're right from the Mercedes perspective, but in India, the average is at about 14 kilowatt hour. That is what.
Yeah, but that's.
Yeah,
but it is not only, yes, it is about a cost. So in India, roughly it is 10,000 rupees per kilowatt hour, the cost is, and it has to come down because Indian customer is price sensitive. But I think the also limitations I'm seeing from the technology point of view. Today, I'm not sure, must be, but probably the OEMs today are not really ready with the technology where they can pack 50 kilowatt hour and deliver in a car, because you need a dedicated architecture. Right now, majority of the efforts are happening in reusing the platform or the architecture from the existing IC engine, and you're trying to pack a battery pack in that. And it's I would say, a futile effort. You have to design an architecture, a new car, completely around the battery pack. This could also be a reason that why you are not seeing more capacity in the batteries.
Right. Thanks, Anshuman. Parag, just want to know your take on the swappable batteries as a business model itself.
So at a slightly higher level, I think, see, there are use cases there, which are probably 70, 80 kilometer use cases every day, okay, which are within the range. But the normal usage is quite high on a monthly basis as compared to, let us say, a consumer use case. So we always think about the consumer use case, but there are specific use cases where the advantage of a low cost per kilometer pays off for a Swiggy, for big basket delivering, etc., etc. So I think that is where it will start. Those guys will have access to charging stations. They are corporates and all of that. So they will develop their own infrastructure. That is what will happen. Second, I think at the end of the day, when I started my career in venture capital many years ago, solar power, people used to say so costly and all of that. The advantage with electronics or anything which is remotely connected to electronics is how the prices come down over a period of time. Moore's law is just such an efficient thing that the prices will inevitably come down. So I think it will start. My hypothesis is it will start from these heavy use cases and keep on going to the consumer side, and that's what we are backing. As for swappability, there will be certain use cases. Take a bus, for example, which is a big Delhi bus. There's no way you can charge it. Let's say Big Basket can still afford to keep a 4-hour or a 2-hour gap in between before it starts delivering. There's no way you can charge a bus that way. So swappability will come into some of those applications. So this will not be one concrete solution fit all for the entire market, but swappability has to be fast enough to be like filling petrol at a petrol station.
Hello.
Thanks, Parag. Thanks.
This is Amit. May I just add to that?
Yeah.
So I think on battery swapping, the biggest known example is Better Places in Israel, which was a model tried out in 2007 or 8 in collaboration with Nissan at that time. And I think the model failed for a reason that there couldn't be OEM standardization across batteries. And I think the reason holds true today as well. If you just look at some of the charts or the LinkedIn discourse around how different OEMs compare their battery performances in terms of kilometers delivered per kilowatt hour, which Anshuman also referenced. There's a wide difference between what Tesla is able to achieve versus what a German OEM is able to achieve versus what a US OEM is able to achieve. And the differences lie in where you engineer battery, the platforms, and all the points Anshuman mentioned. So I don't think so. Battery swapping for the reasons for a lack of success of battery swapping in passenger cars have changed between 2007 and 2019. Having said that, certain green shoots do appear in terms of fleet applications, like for the rickshaws in India, or I think even NIO is trying something in China. But otherwise, I don't see any big moves from major OEMs towards swapping in private ownership segment. Thank you.
Okay, guys, that is, I think, Ankit Chotala, do you want to ask? You have a question? Ankit?
Hello.
Yeah, Ankit, go ahead.
Hello.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to add how Anshuman mentioned Parag would be able to help on the user behavior. So Parag, I wanted to know that because this is a kind of industry which will not just work on platform. It requires a proper infrastructure and a huge capex investments involved in it. So going from a user behavior point of view, which is the most key for this, so how would you see on the testing key scenarios or use cases?
Parag, you're on mute.
Sorry. No, I didn't understand the last part of your question, the last sentence.
See, I just want to know this kind of whatever industry, this EV and all what we are having now a discussion on, it's more of an infrastructure based dependent and a capex based model. Platform also is involved. So in order for any organization to go ahead with this, it would require a huge kind of investment, which is not only a platform, but overall other investments. So in order to judge the user behavior and go on an experiment basis, so how would you try to start seeing this? So this was my previous question. So I am trying to just add on to this.
So traditionally, you will find VCs very unwilling to invest in in a technology that require ecosystem changes, isn't it? As a small startup, how much of the ecosystem can you radically change? Yet, if you believe that a change is inevitable, that if not 10 years hence, 20 years hence, 25 years hence, this is the way the world will work, then you will start investing in that segment, and that inflection point, or that point, I shouldn't call it an inflection point. In my view, that point is beginning to get reached. Just like you entrepreneurs, we have to invest ahead of the curve. If we invest behind the curve, then we lose it, isn't it? So we inevitably take some risks, and what you're saying might well turn out to be true, that even 15 years hence, the infrastructure in India is not ready. That is a possibility. In which case, some of the companies we invest in as investors are way too early, will fail. But that's a risk we take. In this case, I think even though it involves a lot of infrastructure, which is beyond the scope of a startup, for the startup to succeed in the first place, but I think it is inevitable. That's why people are investing where they are investing.
Thank you, Parag.
Okay, guys. Thank you very much. I think thank you very much, especially to the speakers for taking your time out on a Saturday. Okay, it's so nice of you. Just before we this thing, special thanks to all the speakers. Quickly, our next event is on April 9th, which is in a business at Unusual. Actually, that's for the founders only. It will be led by Professor Saraswati Saraswati from Virginia Tech. Actually. Garden Business School. Then actually we have a FinTech Friday, which is on a behavioral biometric thing. That's on April 10th. On April 11th, we have an investor's view on given current scenario, which is called Startup Jump. And Uncertainty Conference is on April 24th. Last but not the least, I just want to say thanks to all the volunteers actually. Yeah, that is it from this thing. Thank you very much. Have a great weekend. Okay,
thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you, Keshwar. Thanks.
Thank you, and have a nice weekend, everybody. It was
have a nice weekend. Thank you. Bye.
For answering questions, and it was very interesting to interact with fellow panelists. Hope to stay in touch.
Okay, guys. Thank you.
Thank you.